The 29-year-old Olivia is sitting on a bus heading to the countryside. It's a 4-hour journey, and while most passengers complain about the discomfort of sitting for hours, Olivia takes her time looking at the window and reflecting on things in her life. She's been working in an accounting firm for 5 years now, and this month was quite hectic. It's good timing that her leave was approved for a whole week, so she decided to get out of the city and spend a few days in her hometown. She hasn't been back there since she left for college. City life has its perks, but country life offers respite and simple living, something she never expected to desire. Age must have caught up to her. Gazing through the bus window, I miss doing this kind of road trip, she said to herself. She suddenly recalled her childhood filled with outdoor adventures, where she and her family spent a lot of time camping and fishing. But her parents got divorced when Olivia was about to enter high school. From an outdoorsy little girl, Olivia turned into a teenage diva, likely brought on by her parents' divorce. The bus suddenly stopped and Olivia was released from the trance of the past. She turned and saw a few peeps rising from their seats. She looked back at the window and noticed that it was a familiar bus stop at the park. She rose from her seat and quickly got off the bus, excited about seeing one of the places she loved when she was a child. It was dark already, so she looked at her watch and it read 7:05 in the evening. Just seeing the familiar path that crosses the whole park triggered memories. She started walking, and one of her memories flashed before her eyes. She remembered the old swings just beside a small pond, which now seemed renovated. She used to play on those swings, smiling and laughing as her father pushed gently. Her mother was smiling dearly, her eyes showing that unique expression of love and affection. Olivia's thoughts were suddenly shaken by a blood-curdling scream in the park. Spooked, she instantly looked left and right, trying to find the source. There could be someone injured and needed some help. Unable to find it, she frantically ran forward until she saw a figure right next to what seemed to be a sandbox. She moved closer to make out the details. She could tell that a person was sitting with their back toward Olivia. They appeared to be curled up into a ball, with occasional sniffling, telling Olivia that they were crying. But Olivia couldn't see the person's face. All she could tell at this point was the long, disheveled hair and the worn-out black dress. Pausing her approach, "Are you okay?" Olivia uttered. No reply. The sniffling continues. "Did you hurt yourself?" Olivia said, concerned if the person got hurt. Though she finds it a little weird for that person to get hurt in a sandbox. Judging by the size of the unknown person, Olivia assumed it was an adult. She waited for the person to respond, but again, no answer. Then the sniffling stopped. Olivia looked around and couldn't find anyone else. Odd because it's not that late and there's a bus stop. People should still be walking the common path. Then, she turned back to the figure and found it standing right in front of her. Olivia froze, unable to move as she saw the dreadful eyes of the creature. 2 eye sockets filled with blackness except for the red glowing dots at the center. The creature wailed and the force seemingly sucked away Olivia's life force into the hollowed mouth of emptiness. Olivia's breathing was rapid and erratic as she remained frozen on her spot. Olivia jumped on her seat, gasping for air. A man was shaking her out of her nightmare. Olivia, with beads of sweat on her forehead, realized that it was just a bad dream. She probably dozed off while watching the fields through the window. The man next to her asked, "You good?" Olivia could only nod. She attempted to calm herself, gauging her surroundings with her eyes. She was definitely on the bus, still moving toward its destination. She peeked at the view behind her seat, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, she couldn't shake off the dreadful feeling left by that dream. Her gut told her that she and that hideous creature had a connection. But how and why? Several minutes passed after that disturbing dream when the bus stopped. The driver called the bus stop and it rang familiar to her. She hastily picked herself, walked down the aisle, and dropped herself off the large transit. The sandbox, she whispered to herself, after which she felt a chill down her spine. A breeze swept the park and the leaves rustled. She started walking down the common path, which she needed to cross to reach the taxi stand. Not far from the bus stop, she noticed a man who seemed to be closing up shop. Though for some reason, she couldn't make out what exactly he was selling. Olivia didn't think it was too early, so she asked, "Closing so soon?" "Oh God, you startled me." The man was obviously surprised by her voice. "I'm sorry, didn't mean to scare you." Olivia apologized. "Young lady, midnight is nearing and you shouldn't be traveling here alone," the man continued. Olivia checked her watch and the arms showed around 10 minutes before 12. "I used to live here and the park is always known for being safe," Olivia countered. "Not anymore," the man replied. "Something terrible happened some years back. This place gets tainted at midnight. Look around. You hardly see anyone else passing through the park, unless they really need to," he explained. "There's something dark lurking in here. No matter what happens, keep walking and ignore everything." He ended and Olivia was speechless. The breeze continued as the man resumed what he was doing. The clinking sound from the vendor's cart reverberated throughout the park. Nothing else could be heard besides that, the rustling of the leaves and the crickets. But what really put Olivia off was the sandbox, located near the middle of the park, just at the right of the common path. She wouldn't cross it, though she definitely would see whatever lies within. On the left, she could spot the swings and the pond, and nothing seemed unusual there. She turned her back to the vendor and saw them hauling the cart away. Now alone at the park, in the middle of the night, she took a deep breath and told herself that it was only a dream and nothing more. There could be scarier things like thugs or wild animals. Convinced of those threats, she proceeded until reaching half of the park, where the common path opened up a crossroad. While Olivia wanted to keep moving, her gut told her to peek to her left. Unable to fight the curiosity, she took a glance at her peripheral and found something curled in a ball. Spooked, and now her heart was racing. She turned her gaze sharply to confirm what she saw, but only to find a big red toy ball. When she realized that, she closed her eyes and breathed a sigh of relief, convinced that nothing was horrific in her childhood park. Olivia turned her sight back to the common path, but just before she could take another step, a voice echoed. It was the familiar sniffling. Her head automatically turned to her right, and there it was, a dark silhouette hovering by the swing. The same swing she used to play on when she was a child. As if sentient, the dark figure swiftly looked right back at Olivia. The hollowed eye sockets highlighted the insidious red dots at the center, glowing in the night. Olivia realized she failed the old man's advice. Keep walking and ignore everything. The lampposts of the park dimmed to the point of near nothingness. The breeze had stopped and the crickets were muted. Still scared beyond reason, Olivia didn't notice that a thin fog began to emanate from her own 2 feet. Deep inside, she was battling her fear. On the outside, her mouth was agape, yet no sound would come out. The fright took her screams away, chewing her courage bit by bit as a dark figure slowly approached her. Floating gently in the air, the dark creature was closing the gap between them. Like in trance, Olivia had no choice but to look straight at it, giving her the ghastly view no one would ever desire. The eye sockets were empty except for the glowing red dots. It had no nose or mouth or ears, just holes that stared at the void. It was covered by a black tattered gown that never seemed to touch the ground. Olivia. It uttered her name in a slow, crooked voice. Waiting, searching. It pressed with its disturbing voice. Olivia remained frozen as the floating fright finally got itself face to face with what might be its next victim. Her breathing was shallow, her hands were shaking, her heart was racing, and her stomach twisting on itself. Olivia felt like she was about to die. Then the creature shrieked at her face, showing countless sharp teeth from the emptiness of its mouth. Olivia felt a cold force hit her entire face, which invaded her nose, mouth, and throat. The feeling was icy cold, but instead of freezing her, it was consuming her soul. Wah! Olivia rose from her seat on the bus as she held both of her hands on her neck, gasping for dear life. A nightmare within a nightmare. Orange Hill Park, the bus driver shouted. Eyes wide like never before, Olivia was being called to get off the bus because she was home. Scared out of her mind, Olivia reluctantly got up and walked down the aisle, dreading what might come next once she was off the bus. After what felt like an eternity, she finally got her feet on the bus stop concrete as the vehicle roared and left her to her own fate. She looked straight at the common path of the park and anything nearby, and there he was, the old vendor already closing up his stall. She quickly looked at her watch and the arms pointed at 2 minutes after 12 midnight. She panicked knowing what lies ahead could be her doom. So she fished out her phone and sifted through the contacts, looking for anyone she could call to pick her up. One entry caught her attention. She tapped on the screen to call her friend Stacy. No answer after a while. She dialed again, and several seconds later, "Olivia, it's past midnight." Stacy's voice laced with sleep. "I got off the bus, I'm at the park, and someone's after me." Olivia hastily responded. "What? Who's after you?" Stacy replied, now wide awake. "No time to explain, just get me out of here," Olivia insisted. "I'm on my way," Stacy confirmed. 10 minutes passed and Stacy arrived in the car. Olivia had been quiet throughout the ride until they reached Stacy's place. Inside, Olivia and Stacy sat in the living room with warm tea in each hand and tension that you could slice with a knife. "I had a nightmare on the bus on my way here," Olivia began. You could hear the worry in her voice. "All I could remember was me crossing the park when a dark creature, spirit or whatever, suddenly popped out of nowhere." She paused, trying to fight the anxiety. "I could feel the fear as if it was real. I know it's just a bad dream, but there's that sick feeling in my gut telling me that something's really off. Why me? who was never around for years, she ended. I really thought your boyfriend or someone you hooked up with was going after you like a madman, Stacy quipped. But when you added the park in the mix, something came to mind, she added. It wasn't the same place anymore, Olivia. Someone killed themselves at the park. The police said that the body was found near the sandbox pit. When the investigation was over, everyone was pointing out murder-suicide. Stacy solemnly explained. Murder-suicide? What? Who? Why? Olivia implored. Lexi. She's from the same high school as we were. But I don't know her personally. I don't even remember we ever hung out with them, Stacy replied. Something in the back of her head rang like a bell. Olivia recalled someone named Lexi in high school. That time, Olivia earned her diva status and attitude not just because her parents divorced. It was bolstered by Olivia's real talent, singing. She was hailed by teachers, and every girl wanted to be her, and every boy wanted to be with her. Among many who adored her voice, Lexi stood out because of her enthusiasm and respect. Lexi would never bother Olivia unnecessarily or get in her way. She was a huge supporter that knew their boundaries. Is that thing Lexi? Why would she come after me? Olivia thought to herself. Don't overthink this. You're not the first to face whatever's out there, Stacy voiced, pulling Olivia back to reality. Stay here for the night. You know the drill. The spare room is still available, so get some rest. Pretty sure you're dead beat, she added. Stacy stood up, went for the front door, checked the locks, then proceeded to her room. My fridge got stock. Just grab anything if you're hungry. Got an early shift tomorrow. Nighty-night. Her last words before going to bed. Olivia felt exhausted, sighing loudly. She headed to the spare room, which is just next to Stacy's. She grabbed the doorknob, turned it, and lightly pushed it to open. The door, however, unleashed a raspy sound, almost like a voice, as if a person was exhaling. Olivia's body jolted in surprise, her arm now close to her chest. She slowly grabbed the knob and then repeated the action, but the door just gave her a simple squeak. The night was uneventful for Olivia. No nightmares, scary sounds, or anything. After breakfast, Stacy and Olivia went their separate ways. Stacy to work and Olivia to her parents' house, now occupied by her aunt and cousins. A small reunion with some drinks and great conversations took place there. Olivia felt relaxed and at ease, recharged by this short respite from city life. No ghosts or scary stuff ever occurred at her parents' house during her weekend stay, or even after she traversed the park during the day on her way back to the city. She smiled at the bus stop and assumed that maybe her inner worries caused the nightmares. 6 painful hours later, thanks to the city's eternal traffic, Olivia was finally on her couch. She was mentally appreciating that pleasant break when out of nowhere, Lexi's image flashed into her mind. Her curiosity piqued, and now she wanted to know what happened to her number one fan. Social media might give her something. She typed in Lexi's full name on the search bar, and there it was, Lexi's profile without restrictions. Nothing was out of the ordinary in the recent posts and profile pics except for one. A picture with Adam and Lexi, hugging and smiling in front of the camera. Adam was one of the geeks in high school who unexpectedly turned into a gorgeous beefcake years later. Olivia scrolled further and discovered the two weren't a simple couple. They were married. Olivia and Adam met at a conference of their respective companies 5 years ago. Their meeting turned quickly into flirtation that peaked at steamy nights. Olivia had no idea Adam was married. She definitely remembered Adam wearing no ring or that signature mark. Suddenly, the sound of static filled her apartment. Olivia was pulled out of reminiscing and to the TV screen in front of her. The screen was pitch black, but when stared at the reflection, it showed more. A dark silhouette was sitting right next to her, displaying the same glowing red eyes she could never forget. Olivia couldn't help but slowly turn her face toward the seat, reflected by the TV screen. Her gaze locked into the red light deep within the empty eye sockets. The creature shrilled so loud it swallowed Olivia's mind, but outside her apartment, the screams didn't sound monstrous. It was her voice. Olivia was screaming for dear life, alone in her apartment, with the front door locked from the inside.